Hello and welcome to another painting video. In this video I'll be painting a 500 point Gloomspite Gitz army in celebration of their new battle tome and because I bought the Christmas box. How could I pass on that? A box full of squigs? As you can see here, I went heavy on the psychedelic light-bringing mushrooms. It was a fun experiment. Let me show you how I did it. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the preparation of this army. I bought some excellent base toppers for me to print, so it looks like the squigs are running in a cave, bouncing and running towards a battle. A link to the STL can be found in the video description. And with Gitz should come a lot of mushrooms. Luckily I was able to find an STL with lots of printable mushrooms. It was quite a preparation to put all those tiny mushrooms on the bases, but it's worth it as it looks awesome. As you can see here, I've used texture paste for added support because all the models are stuck to the bases with superglue. Here is the army ready for priming and painting. I primed all the models fully black to begin with. To start, I sprayed a zenithal highlight with white primer on all the models. Just keep the models on an angle so the deepest shadows will remain black. Next up, I covered the bases with aluminum foil because I wanted to keep the zenithal highlight on the bases intact while I sprayed the squigs. I'm going to spray the base colors of all the squigs now. Of course, this can also be done with a brush, but with an airbrush is a huge time saver. The red squigs get a base coat of Blood Angel Red. The orange squigs get a base coat of Gryph-hound Orange. Contrast paints work really well with the zenithal highlight and they have a beautiful even coverage straight out of the airbrush. The pink squigs get a base coat of Voluptuous Pink. I did my best not to hit the goblins on top, and I mostly succeeded. On the bigger models, do go over it a couple of times to make sure you hit all the areas. I actually had to go back because I did miss some parts. First, let's paint some red squigs, a classic. I highlight the skin with Wild Rider Red. I switched to a brush, but I'll be coming back to the airbrush at the end of the video. Then I add highlights of Wild Rider Red mixed with Dorn Yellow. Because it's skin, I try to focus on the values of the raised areas instead of just edge highlighting. Let the zenithal highlight be your guide here and don't bother highlighting the dark areas as you won't see them anyway. I add more Dorn Yellow to the previous mix and add even more highlights. Smaller ones this time. A very simple way of highlighting the skin, but it does make the squig stand out nicely. Let's continue with the orange squigs. I want to make the squigs bright orange, so I layer on Troll Slayer Orange on the raised areas of the skin. I add a highlight of Fire Dragon Bright. And I add another highlight of Fire Dragon Bright, mixed with Dorn Yellow. You might think these highlights are very bright, but this will come in handy later on when I apply the object source lighting to the models. The pink squigs get a layer of Emperor's Children on the raised areas of the skin. Then a highlight of Fulgrim Pink, which is a very nice highlighting color. I end with a highlight of Fulgrim Pink mixed with Palace Wish Flesh. A note on the giant cave squig. I basically used the same techniques as the smaller squigs. However, I did go over the model with the same colors several times to create more layers of that color. The big areas of this model demand it. I think out of the three, the pink one is my favorite, but having all these different hues creates some fun diversity in your units. Next, I'm painting all the details on the squigs, regardless of their skin color. I base coat the gums with Screamer Pink. I stick to the lighter areas, leaving the dark parts black in most cases. The gums get a shade of Druky Violet. This blends the base coat and the parts I left dark nicely together. I highlight the gums with Emperor's Children. And I add dots of Fulgrim Pink to simulate the wetness of the gums. All the teeth and claws get a base coat of Ushabti Bone. A nice thick coat of Skeleton Horde. And a highlight of Screaming Skull. Sounds easy, right? Well, let me tell you about the amount of teeth squigs have. This took ages to base coat, but it does look really cool. Let's give them some eyes next. This is where contrast paint again comes in very handy. I paint the sockets of the eyes with black Templar. I paint the eyes with Flesh Gitz yellow. And add a dot of Dorn Yellow to give them some fun, beady looking eyes. For variety's sake, I want to give the horns another color, so I paint them with black Templar. This contrast paint covers really well, so there's no need to base coat this in white first. I layer on Thunderhawk Blue. Add a highlight of Phrygian Grey. And I add another highlight of Blue Horror to make the horns a bit shiny. I love the manic face on this squig. It looks quite horrifying. There's a huge tongue there, which also needs some paint actually. I first paint the tongue with Leviathan Blue. Again, this contrast paint covers really well, so there's no need to prep the tongue. Let the paint play around with the volumes already on the tongue from airbrushing. I layer on Cantor Blue on the erased areas. And I do the same with Alaitoc Blue. I make sure to make the highlights smaller and smaller so the previous layers are also visible. A new layer, this time it's Lothran Blue. And finally I add Blue Horror to sell the shininess of the tongue. Not a lot of squigs have visible tongues, so this step was easy to do. I really love the giant cave squig, it's such a great model. The squigs are pretty much done now. Next, I'm going to paint some goblins. After repainting the hands with white scar, I paint the goblin skin with Gut Rippa Flesh. A new contrast paint and just the green hue I was looking for. I want my goblins to look a little bit pale. They're living in a cave after all. I highlight the skin with Deepkin Flesh. I highlight again with a mix of Deepkin Flesh and Palette Switch Flesh. Deepkin keeps a very nice pale green hue, which is perfect for my pale looking goblins. Toenails are painted with Orc Flesh. And the beady eyes are base coated in Evil Sun Scarlet. Finally, I add a dot of Dorn Yellow to finish the eyes. The pale looking goblins will look great contrasted by the neon colors of the OSL, I'll be doing later. Now to paint some proper cultists' robes. As with my witch elves boots, I'm going to base coat the areas that are going to be black with Gryph-Charger Grey. The next step is painting the robes with black Templar. I really like this contrast paint as it doesn't make the robes completely black, and because of the Gryph-Charger Grey it leaves a nice faint blue hue. I highlight the robes with Thunderhawk Blue and highlight again with Verizian Grey. As well as the squigs, make sure you only highlight the parts that need it. Anything in the shadow should remain unlayered and unhighlighted to save yourself some time. Let's paint some non-metallic metal in a very dirty way. First, paint the metal with Basilicanum Grey. Next, shade the metal with Agrax Earthshade. Now it's starting to look very dirty. Highlight the metal with Celestra Grey. And highlight again with Ulthan Grey. The brass or gold parts get a base coat of snakebite leather. A highlight with Hobgrot Hide. And a final highlight of Dorn Yellow. I personally love the way the dirty metal is looking. It might not be for everyone, but you can always highlight this with Roomfang Steel or any bright silver to get more of a standard metallic look. Now for some quick and dirty details. First, I paint any weapon handles or wood with Wildwood. Goblin teeth and any bony decoration gets a coat of Skeleton Horde. And any pouches I will paint in a random contrast color. I picked Blood Angel Red, but I'll probably vary this up with other units. The goblins are done. Now on to the experimental phase of this video. First, I prep the base with a coat of Gryph-Charger Grey. I'm doing this with the airbrush, but you can also use a normal brush. I base coat the base with Basilicanum Grey, creating a rather boring looking cave interior. For these following steps, I'm using some new inks, but all these steps can probably also be done with some contrast paints. First, I use titanium white on the mushrooms on the base to create a light source. Next, I'm using titanium white on the models. Not gonna lie, this was quite a harrowing moment to basically cover a fully painted miniature with a white spray. I angled the airbrush from the POV of the mushrooms and let it loose. I want the mushrooms to be glowing in 3 different colors. First comes blue. I use an ink called Fluorescent Blue, which really reacts like a watery contrast paint. I spray the mushrooms and the model from the same angle, so the light makes sense. I didn't have a green ink, so I used Tesseract Glow, which is a very bright neon green color. The color was very saturated, so I want to come back to it to lighten it up just a little bit. The third color I wanted to be a bright magenta. I used Quinacridone Magenta mixed with a dash of titanium white. This ink did not react like a contrast paint and was also very saturated. I used a bright pink called Rose Light to highlight the magenta OSL. And I highlighted again with rose light mixed with some titanium white. The green lights were further highlighted by Dorn Yellow straight out of the airbrush. And finally I painted the base with Corvus Black. And here we have 500 points of Gloomspite Gitz ready for their path to glory. I had a lot of fun experimenting with the inks and to create these weird psychedelic OSL lights. If this is too much out there for you, I hope the first part of the tutorial will help you to paint some awesome looking Squigs and Goblins. Now I haven't forgotten my Daughters of Cain army, so the next couple of videos will be about them so I can finish them. But the Gitz will be back, because there's a loon shrine to paint. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram, where I post pictures of current projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.